The biggest battery deal in the entire history of human civilization was just signed. And I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now, because this one is genuinely different. Not for lithium. Not for anything you have ever seen trending in a tech headline before. A single order, 60 gigawatt hours, of a battery that the smartest and most experienced people in the entire industry had basically declared dead and buried just 2 years ago. Let that number sink in properly for a sec. 60 gigawatt hours. That is enough stored energy to charge every single smartphone on Earth at the exact same moment. Every phone. Every person. Every country on the planet. All at once. Simultaneously. And the company that just pulled this off is not some scrappy little startup burning through investor money in a garage somewhere and praying for a lucky break. It is the single largest battery manufacturer on the entire planet, headquartered in China, and they just proved to the whole world that the element sitting quietly inside your ordinary table salt might be the single most important ingredient in the entire future of human energy. If that sounds completely unbelievable to you right now, that is honestly fair. Because it kind of is. But every single part of this story is real. Every number. Every claim. Every deal. And by the time you reach the end of this video, you will understand exactly how it happened, why almost nobody in the mainstream saw it coming, and why it is about to completely change everything you thought you knew about energy storage, electric vehicles, and the direction of modern technology. This is not just a battery story. This is a 30-year thriller packed with billion-dollar bets, phones catching fire inside people's pockets on commercial flights, a material science problem that stumped the sharpest researchers on Earth for 4 straight decades, and a commodity price crash so sudden and so violent that it forced an entire global industry to tear up its long-term playbook and start completely over from scratch. And right in the middle of all the chaos, a solution that had been sitting quietly in university research papers for over 20 years suddenly became the most important technology on the planet. Buckle in, because we are starting at the very beginning of this story, and we are not skipping anything important. Right now, as you watch this, there is almost certainly a lithium battery within arm's reach of you. Your phone. Your laptop. Maybe your car sitting in the driveway outside. Maybe the electric scooter locked up on the pavement near your building. Lithium-ion batteries are so completely and deeply sewn into the fabric of modern daily life that most people have genuinely never once stopped to question them. They just expect the phone to charge overnight, the laptop to survive a full day of back-to-back meetings, and the car to get them wherever they need to go without any drama or surprises. And for 30 solid years, lithium has delivered on that promise, so quietly and so consistently that the entire world basically stopped asking whether anything better might possibly exist. Before lithium took over completely, the world ran on nickel-cadmium batteries. These things were heavy, bulky, and held a fraction of the energy that lithium could store in the same space. The jump to lithium-ion in the early 1990s was not a small incremental upgrade. It was a total and complete reimagining of what a battery could actually be and do. Energy density tripled compared to what came before. Devices got smaller, lighter, and dramatically more powerful all at the same time. The modern smartphone as you know it today would simply not exist without that shift happening when it did. Neither would the slim everyday laptop, the tiny wireless earbuds sitting in your ear, or the electric vehicle that can now drive 300 miles on a single overnight charge. In 1991, a single camcorder battery lasted about 1 hour of recording. By the 2000s, the same weight of lithium was powering phones that stayed alive for multiple days. By the 2010s, it was moving full-size family cars down the highway for hundreds of kilometers on a single charge. Each new generation of devices pushed battery engineers to extract more performance from the same underlying chemistry, and each time without fail lithium delivered the goods. It became the unchallenged default assumption behind almost every single piece of technology that needed portable power to function. But here is the deeply uncomfortable truth about something that works well enough for long enough. People stop asking whether something better might exist somewhere else. Research money stops flowing toward alternatives. Scientists move on to other problems. And when that happens, the hidden cracks in the foundation of that technology have a very natural tendency to quietly grow wider and wider until one day they become completely impossible for anyone to ignore any longer. That day arrived for lithium. And when it did, it arrived fast. In 2016, Samsung released the Galaxy Note 7 smartphone. The early reviews from journalists and tech experts were genuinely outstanding across the board. Pre-orders were massive. Consumer excitement was at a peak. And then within just a matter of weeks, the phone started catching fire. In people's pockets on city streets, on commercial aircraft mid-flight, on bedside tables while families were sleeping in their homes at night. Airlines around the world banned the device from flights entirely and refused to let passengers even carry it in their bags. Samsung eventually pulled the entire product line from the market at a staggering and very public cost of $5 billion. The Note 7 became one of the most talked about and most infamous product disasters in the entire history of consumer electronics. But here is the part of that story that almost everyone completely missed at the time. This was not really a Samsung engineering failure at its core. Samsung absolutely made specific and serious mistakes in how they designed and manufactured that particular battery for that particular phone. But the underlying danger that caused those fires was never a Samsung problem. It was always there, sitting quietly and patiently inside every lithium battery ever made by any company anywhere in the world. The liquid inside a lithium battery that carries the charged particles between the two ends is made from organic chemical solvents. Those solvents are flammable by their very nature. There is no engineering workaround that fully removes that fundamental fact. The materials that happen to be best at efficiently carrying lithium particles are also the materials that burn when things go wrong. If a battery overheats, gets physically punctured, or gets overcharged past its safe limit, that liquid can ignite rapidly. And when one single cell catches fire, the intense heat it immediately produces raises the temperature of every surrounding cell until those ignite too. A devastating chain reaction spreading from cell to cell like dominoes falling inside a sealed metal box with nowhere for the energy to go. Here is a number that should genuinely shock you. Right now in New York City in 2026, lithium battery fires have officially replaced electrical fires as the #1 leading cause of fatal fires across the entire city. Not a statistic from a decade ago pulled from an old report. That is the current documented reality of 2026. The problem is not getting smaller. It is getting bigger every single year as more lithium batteries enter homes, vehicles, and buildings across the world. Then, there is the cold weather weakness that does not get nearly enough attention in public conversation. In freezing winter temperatures, the charged particles inside a lithium battery stop moving smoothly through the liquid and instead begin depositing themselves onto the inner surface of the battery in tiny sharp metallic spikes called lithium dendrites. 3 countries alone, Australia, Chile, and China, currently control 90% of all the lithium that gets mined from the ground on this entire planet. China alone processes around 65% of that raw mined lithium into battery-grade purified material and manufactures approximately 75% of all lithium-ion batteries produced anywhere on Earth. That single fact means that most of the world's electric cars, consumer smartphones, laptops, and large-scale energy storage systems all depend on a supply chain that runs through a very small number of specific places on the map. Between 2020 and 2022, the price of key lithium raw material rose by a factor of 8. Not 8%. 8 times more expensive in just 2 years. Demand for electric vehicles was surging faster than anyone in the industry had realistically predicted. Battery factories were scaling up production faster than supply chains could possibly keep pace with. Then in 2023, the market swung hard in the complete opposite direction. Lithium prices crashed by more than 70% in a single calendar year. Battery companies that had locked themselves into long-term supply contracts at the peak prices found themselves suddenly paying far more than the actual current market rate for their core ingredient. The entire industry had been running detailed multi-year business plans and financial models against a commodity that was behaving more like a speculative meme stock than a reliable industrial raw material. Completely unpredictable. Totally outside anyone's real control. For governments around the world trying to build genuine domestic energy independence, and for car manufacturers trying to hit price targets that would finally make electric vehicles financially accessible to average everyday buyers, this situation represented a fundamental and very serious strategic vulnerability. The world had quietly built the entire foundation of its clean energy future on top of a raw material that a small handful of countries controlled, with prices that could double or completely collapse based on geopolitical factors and market forces entirely outside the battery industry's ability to influence or manage. And yet, despite all of this well-documented danger and instability, the global industry had spent 30 full years looking almost exclusively at lithium, and only lithium as the answer to every single energy storage question on the table. The reason for that dangerous blind spot starts with a single decision made back in the early 1970s that quietly shaped and constrained everything that followed for the next 5 decades. Back in the 1960s, before lithium was even on any serious researcher's radar, scientists were already actively exploring a completely different element as the genuine future of batteries. That element was sodium. It sits right next to lithium on the periodic table. It behaves in almost exactly the same way chemically. Sodium had one very specific technical problem that nobody in the world could figure out how to solve for decades. Sodium particles are about 35% bigger in size than lithium particles. The carbon material that lithium stores itself inside, called graphite, has very precisely and evenly spaced layers running through its entire structure. Lithium particles fit cleanly and perfectly into those layers and slide smoothly in and out thousands of times over many years without causing any damage to the structure at all. Sodium particles are simply too big to do the same thing. Every single time a sodium particle tried to slot itself into graphite, it would force those perfectly spaced layers apart and permanently damage the internal structure of the material. After just a few hundred charge cycles, the battery would be degraded so badly it was essentially useless. This one single material problem kept sodium completely out of serious commercial consideration for over 40 years. 40 years of dead ends, abandoned research projects, and frustrated scientists who could see the potential of sodium but could not find a material that would actually work with it reliably at scale, until someone discovered a completely different kind of carbon that nobody had seriously considered before. And when they did, the entire equation changed overnight. In the year 2000, a research team working in Canada discovered something that the battery science world had not seen before. They called it hard carbon. Regular graphite that lithium uses looks exactly like a perfectly stacked and organized deck of playing cards. Every single layer is parallel, evenly spaced, and arranged in a beautifully orderly structure. Sodium particles are just too large and too clumsy to fit between those tightly organized cards without wrecking the whole arrangement over time. Hard carbon is the complete opposite of that orderly structure. It is made by taking organic material, things like agricultural plant waste, raw biomass, or even simple glucose sugar, and heating it to temperatures between 1000 and 1400 degrees Celsius inside a completely sealed container with absolutely no oxygen present at all. The carbon atoms inside freeze themselves in place in a permanently chaotic and disordered arrangement, full of irregular gaps of different sizes and tiny internal pores scattered throughout the material. Those irregular gaps and pores are big enough and varied enough in their dimensions to store sodium particles comfortably and release them again without the structure breaking down or degrading over thousands of repeated cycles. For the very first time in the history of battery science, sodium had a material that could genuinely survive the demands of real-world daily use. But as every scientist and every engineer who has ever worked in this field knows very well, a laboratory breakthrough and a commercially viable product that can be manufactured. The Naxtra delivers 175 watt-hours of energy per kilogram in real-world tested conditions. That number puts it directly in the same performance range as the lithium iron phosphate batteries that are currently powering most of the affordable electric vehicles being sold to everyday consumers around the world today. In a real production car on a real road that translates to over 500 kilometers of driving range on a single full charge, with a charge from empty to 80% taking just 15 minutes at a fast charging station. Those are not carefully selected laboratory numbers taken under perfect controlled conditions designed to impress investors at a presentation. Those are production-ready real-world numbers coming from a battery that is already being manufactured at commercial scale and going into actual vehicles that real people are driving on real roads right now. But the cycle life performance is honestly where things start to get truly remarkable, and where sodium starts to separate itself from lithium in ways that matter enormously for the long-term economics of electric vehicles and large-scale energy storage. The Naxtra can handle more than 10,000 full charge and discharge cycles before it shows any meaningful degradation in its storage capacity or performance. That number is roughly 3 times the usable lifespan of the lithium iron phosphate cells it is directly competing against in the market today. To put that into a time frame that actually means something in everyday human terms, if you charge this battery completely once every single day without missing a single day, that battery would still be performing at a high level after 27 full years of daily use. 27 years. That is longer than most people keep any single vehicle they own. That changes the entire financial calculation around electric vehicles in a fundamental way, because the battery is no longer the weak link in the lifespan equation. Then, there is the cold weather performance, and this is genuinely where sodium stops being merely impressive and starts being something that feels almost unfair in comparison to lithium. The liquid electrolyte inside the Naxtra battery stays completely fluid and fully functional at temperatures as low as -58 degrees Celsius. At -40 degrees Celsius, a temperature that regularly occurs across large parts of Canada, Russia, Scandinavia, and northern China during winter months, the Naxtra battery still holds and delivers 90% of its full rated charge capacity without any special heating system or thermal management intervention required. A lithium battery at that exact same temperature is barely functioning at all. It has lost so much of its available capacity that the vehicle it is powering becomes genuinely unreliable for everyday transportation needs. So with better cold weather performance, longer cycle life, dramatically lower price per kilowatt hour, and a far more stable and geographically distributed supply chain, does all of this mean that lithium is completely finished and sodium has won the battle for good? The honest answer is no. And the reason why is actually more interesting than a simple winner-takes-all story would be. Sodium-ion batteries have one real limitation that the laws of physics make very difficult to fully escape, no matter how much engineering brilliance and research money you throw at the problem. That limitation is energy density by weight. Because sodium particles are physically heavier and larger in size than lithium particles, there is a natural ceiling on how much total energy you can pack into a given weight of sodium-ion battery material. For most applications, that ceiling does not matter at all, because the cost savings and the other performance advantages completely outweigh that single limitation in real-world use. But for certain very specific and very demanding applications, that ceiling matters enormously. Electric aviation is the clearest example. When you are designing an aircraft, every single extra gram of battery weight costs you range and payload capacity in ways that cannot be easily compensated for by other design choices. In that environment, lithium, and the even more advanced lithium chemistries currently being developed in laboratories around the world will almost certainly remain the dominant choice for years and possibly decades to come. For consumer electronics, the situation is similar. The battery inside your smartphone has to fit inside a device that has almost no spare physical room, and where consumers expect the device to get thinner and lighter with every new generation, not heavier. In that environment, the higher energy density of lithium means it is likely to stay dominant in phones, tablets, and wearable devices for the foreseeable future, regardless of what happens in the electric vehicle and grid storage market. What CATL is actually building toward with its sodium-ion investment is not a simple replacement story where one chemistry defeats another and takes everything. It is something far more sophisticated and far more interesting than that. It is a genuine partnership between two different chemistries where each one handles the specific jobs and the specific conditions it was actually designed to be best. CATL has already built and demonstrated a production-ready electric vehicle battery pack that physically splits its total energy storage capacity into two completely separate zones inside the same battery housing. One zone uses sodium-ion cells. The other zone uses lithium-ion cells. And the entire system is managed in real time by onboard software that constantly monitors temperature, driving speed, current state of charge. The 60 gigawatt-hour contract that opened this video fits perfectly and precisely into that larger vision that CATL has been building toward for the past decade. But to truly understand what that number actually represents in the real world, you need a point of comparison that makes the scale concrete and tangible. CATL shipped approximately 122 gigawatt-hours of total energy storage batteries across all of its product lines combined during the entire full year of 2025. Every electric vehicle battery, every grid storage system, every industrial application, everything they made and shipped in 12 full months of maximum production operation added up to 122 gigawatt-hours. This single sodium-ion order represents roughly half of that entire annual output. Half of everything the largest battery manufacturer on Earth produced in a full year, ordered in a single deal for a technology that was not even in serious commercial production 12 months before the contract was signed. That is not an incremental step forward in battery technology. That is a volcanic eruption of market confidence in a completely new chemistry happening at a speed that the industry has genuinely never seen before in its entire history. And it raises a question that is worth sitting with seriously for a moment. Why did it take this long? The original scientific research proving that hard carbon could successfully store and release sodium ions was published and available to the entire global research community in the year 2000. The fundamental technical viability of sodium-ion technology for large-scale energy storage applications has been understood and documented for years before the current surge of investment and attention. But serious committed corporate investment and genuine mainstream industry attention did not begin flowing towards sodium-ion technology in any meaningful volume until 2022. Almost perfectly and precisely tracking the exact moment when lithium prices exploded to 8 times their previous levels and made the cost of ignoring the alternative finally and painfully impossible to justify to shareholders and boards of directors. The problems with lithium were never secret or hidden from anyone paying attention. The fire risk was documented publicly. The cold weather performance limitations were well understood by engineers. The supply chain concentration risk was visible to anyone who looked at a map of where lithium actually exists in the ground and where it gets processed into battery-grade material. But when the dominant technology is working well enough for most applications and the profits from that technology are flowing reliably and the switching costs feel high and uncertain, industries have a deeply ingrained and very human tendency to not look seriously for something genuinely better. It takes a real disruption, a sudden price shock that makes the current path financially unsustainable. A moment where the accumulated cost of not changing finally and undeniably outweighs the comfort and familiarity of staying exactly where you are. The sodium-ion battery did not appear out of nowhere in 2022 like a sudden miracle that nobody could have predicted. It was sitting patiently in published research papers and university laboratories for over 20 years, completely available to anyone willing to look at it seriously, waiting for the world to reach the point where it had no financially rational choice but to finally pay attention. That moment arrived because lithium made it arrive by becoming too expensive to ignore the alternative, too geographically concentrated to trust as a foundation for national energy independence, and too fundamentally limited in its safety characteristics to keep defending against an alternative that did not share those same weaknesses. The story of sodium-ion batteries is in many ways not really a technology story at all. It is a story about how industries actually change in the real world. Not through gradual rational optimization, where the best available solution is always adopted as soon as it becomes available, but through sudden painful disruptions that force decision makers to finally look seriously at the alternatives that were always sitting there waiting to be chosen. The next time you hear about a technology being dismissed as impractical or not ready for commercial scale, remember this story. Remember that the research proving sodium-ion batteries could work was published in 2000. Remember that the largest single battery order in human history was just placed for that exact technology in 2026. 26 years is a long time to wait for the world to catch up with what the science already knew. But when the world finally catches up, it tends to move very fast indeed. If this kind of story is exactly what you come to Beyond Human for, hit the like button right now so more people get the chance to see it. Subscribe if you have not already and turn on notifications because we cover stories like this every single week and you do not want to be the last person to know when the next one drops. And now I want to hear directly from you in the comments below. Do you think sodium-ion batteries will genuinely replace lithium in your lifetime, or does lithium still have enough fight and enough engineering momentum left to hold its ground? Let me know what you think. I read every single comment, and the best ones always make it into our community discussions. See you in the next one.